Next episode, I speak with Glenn Zarmanov.
And I can just go, magic wand. The news never lies. The news always tells me the truth.
Glenn believes 9/11 wasn't just a terrorist attack, but an inside job. According to him, 9/11 was orchestrated by the U.S. government, the Rockefellers, and the deep state.
And most people should get their heads examined if they still believe that this was an attack by magic Muslims who rode in on their magic carpets and demolished not just two buildings with two airplanes. If you actually look at the official story, it's actually quite laughable what they're telling you. They're telling you that a bunch of people that couldn't fly a basic airplane pulled off this sophisticated military attack with incredible aerobatic maneuvers. It's people like the shareholders of the Federal Reserve Bank, particularly the Rockefeller family, comes into focus. Why would the firemen lie when they say stuff like, I saw a big black plane, a gray plane, a dark jet with no windows on the side hit the building?
If you're someone who buys into the conspiracy theories, you'll probably be nodding along. But if you don't, you're gonna want to tune into this one. It's amazing. You look exactly the same from how I remember you from like 10 years ago. You look great. I remember, dude, we used to like my buddies and I we would go out, we would go to the gym and get a workout in, and then you would come in and you'd be like, "Can you guys do this?" And you would do this fucking pistol squat. I would be so fun. I would be so mad because I'm like, this guy seems like he doesn't go to the gym at all, but he's able to do this pistol squat. And it would piss me off because I'm like, how the hell is he able to do a pistol squat? He doesn't go to the gym. He doesn't do any of these workouts. And anyone who doesn't know what a pistol squat is, it is hard as hell. Okay. Anyone who just knows how to do a regular squat, oh, there you go. That's a pistol squat right there. One leg.
I was worried the screen crapped out again. I'm going to try to just sit back and let you host the show. I'm watching the clips. I can see
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, is this what you used to do? Did you used to do any of these workouts to work on your pistol squat?
Well, that's an interesting way to start off the show. So I am into calisthenics. It's something that I've been doing ever since I was a kid. I was never really into like traditional team sports. I was always into what you might call extreme sports, like skateboarding, rollerblading, snowboarding, that sort of thing. The only thing I was really good at was skateboarding. I wasn't really good at skiing and all the other winter sports and stuff. But yeah, calisthenics is great. If you can just find like a simple block to work with in the park or on the beach even, when you're on the beach, you can always find some way to do simple exercises. I got inspired also from like, the manual they give you when you're flying in an airplane. Sometimes it tells you to prevent fatigue in the airplane, you might want to do simple exercises like shoulder shrugs or roll your ankles while you're in the seat of the airplane to improve your blood flow and to prevent yourself from kind of cramping up when you're flying for so many hours. So that's the same idea behind the pistol squats. You don't necessarily have to be an Olympic bodybuilder to do these types of exercises. And calisthenics is very welcoming of people of all stripes and sizes and shapes and body types.
So it sounds like you're the only person who it does those things that they hand out in the freaking in the airplane. Like, because I'm like, they hand this stuff out,
I
and I'm
like
like,
to read everything. I like to read
who's
everything.
looking through this? Yeah, that's cool. You're very uh intentional and like present. I like that. That's cool. Do you still do calisthenics?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's always kept me going. It's one of my secret sauces is just simply going for a good walk or going for a good jog, doing a couple pull-ups on a straight bar, or just even push-ups on the flat ground. Pistol squats might be something you have to work your way up to, but yeah, calisthenics is the way to go for anybody who can't afford to go to the gym or doesn't fit in with the traditional, gym bro culture or what have
Right,
you.
right. Let me ask you this: Are you still able to do a pistol squat?
Absolutely. I can do one on each leg, at least one. I don't know if I can do several on command, but I can definitely still do a pistol squat. Yes, yes.
That's amazing, man. Well, you know what? You asked or said this is a weird way to start a show. I don't think anyone wants to like jump right into the conversation we're about to talk about because I think it's a very gray area in American history, and I think having this conversation, you lose a lot of people, you lose friends, even talking about the subject because their reality is, or our reality or your reality, my reality may be completely different from like what theirs is. Um, which is, I guess, the 9/11 conversation we're about to go into. So let me ask you this.
Well,
It,
here. Would you like me to start off the show this way instead? I can just wave a magic wand, Amir. Here's my magic wand. Just go magic wand. The news never lies. The news always tells me the truth. Magic wand. I can do that too.
no, I absolutely believe that the news does lie. It would be ludicrous for anyone to say that these news companies don't have agendas. Like a Fox News doesn't have agenda, a CNN doesn't have an agenda. And funny, like I'll come back home from work some days, and at night when I'm eating my dinner, I'll put on the news. I like listening to a variety of different news, like a CNN, Fox News. You're just throwing
Just
it.
doing a little product placement in the background.
You're just throwing in plugs. Okay. Well, anyways, I like listening to the news sometimes, or just to see what they're talking about. And some of the shit is so comedic, and you could clearly tell there are agendas to rile their base. Um, but let me ask you this. You believe 9/11 was if you could finish that sentence for me, what would it be?
So that's a great segue. So I believe, I really don't believe much anymore nowadays because I've become a skeptic of pretty much everything. So that's the first part to correct semantically, as a lead in to your question. I don't really believe anything. I know because I wrote the book on 9/11. It's called the 9/11 Truth Report. It was a limited run along with my second book. It's actually one book split into two tomes or two volumes. So I just didn't want to write like one big 150 page, 200 pager. So I split it into like, 70 pages, and the second one is like 50 something pages. But taken together, it's basically the book on what happened. And we know what happened. You said it's a gray area, but really the only gray area is up here in the gray matter in between your ears. And most people should get their heads examined if they still believe that this was an attack by magic Muslims who rode in on their magic carpets and demolished not just two buildings with two airplanes, but three buildings. It's now a non-controversial fact, Amir Khan, 20 something years later, that there were actually three World Trade Center buildings that were demolished. The third one was across the street, came
Building
down in
7
the
you're talking
afternoon.
about.
Yeah,
You're
this
talking
is
about
a
building
completely
7.
non-controversial fact. They've tried to make it opaque and obscure all these facts over the years and make up different stories and say that it was gas oil fires, from the oil tanks inside the building. Another explanation that they proffered in the official mythology from the mainstream so-called media was that the antenna from the North Tower, the taller of the Twin Towers, the one that had the spike, the antenna on it, they claim that the antenna actually cut a big gash in Building 7, and that's what caused it to come down later that afternoon. So they came up with all sorts of stories that made people believe all sorts of things. But again, I'm telling you, I wrote the book on 9/11. It's called the 9/11 Truth Report, Meme, Myth, and Ritual. And for the sake of was an occult magic ritual carried out on a global scale by the financiers of the Federal Reserve System. And if you actually do some real history, this isn't a conspiracy theory, this is mainline history, that it's the shareholders of the Federal Reserve that were the actual people behind the attacks on 9/11, such as the Rockefellers, Carnegies, Morgans, and others, and not the likes of Osama bin Laden, the mythological terrorist pope who lives in a grotto in a cave halfway across the world, directing this mythological symbolic attack with a cell phone and a laptop in a cave somewhere in the Hindu Kush in the mountains. So, if we want to talk about belief systems, we have to examine whose mind is actually fleeing from reality when we're talking about these things. Because if you actually look at what actually happened, this was not a surprise attack by a Muslim threat, as was claimed. And in fact, this was an attempt to control the world's economy through subterfuge and economic espionage.
Okay. Okay. Uh, You said a lot there. So you're saying a bunch of retarded Muslims did not just take over a plane and fly into these buildings, but you're saying there was a larger orchestrated plan behind it, What you named a bunch of financiers. Who may be some of these financiers?
Well, look, there's like I said, there's been a lot of cover stories thrown around. You know, like I said, not just for the demolition of the buildings, the way they fell, they made a cover story for that. They also came up with a cover story for who was behind the attack. So a lot of fingers have been pointed in a lot of different directions. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, you have to look at three different factions. Who is able to fund such an operation? Who is able to who has the technical capability to actually pull off such an operation? And number three, who gets the blame for it? So we know who got the blame for it. It was Osama bin Laden and these like you said, these mental defectives. If you actually look at the official story, it's actually quite laughable what they're telling you. They're telling you that a bunch of people that couldn't fly a basic airplane pulled off this sophisticated military attack with incredible aerobatic maneuvers have never been seen before that even the best commercial pilots couldn't pull off. So it's not just the buildings coming down that's in question. It's the whole notion of Muslim terrorists or any of this stuff that, the war on terror in general as a premise has to be questioned. But yeah, to answer your question, it's people like the shareholders of the Federal Reserve Bank, particularly the Rockefeller family, comes into focus when examining this subject. And it's all in my book how the Twin Towers were actually nicknamed David and Nelson after the two Rockefeller brothers, the governor of New York State, and then the other one was David Rockefeller, the head of the Chase Manhattan Bank, whose idea it was in the first place to create those two towers and locate them in downtown Manhattan.
Can we talk a little bit about Larry Silverstein? How does he play a role? Okay, we've got a video up here of the first plane that hits the North Tower. Let's play that there.
Well, Larry Silverstein is the current leaseholder, so he's been blamed for the attack, but he's actually involved in the rebuilding of the site.
So, Glenn, if we look at this video, that looks like the first plane hitting one of the first towers. Like when you say it wasn't, there was this master. There was they were able to do these maneuvers. That doesn't look like to me like there's a maneuver. It just looks
Well,
like
again,
they're just flying right
what
into.
we were told on the news was completely different than what eyewitnesses, including myself, and this is all documented. This isn't just my so-called conspiracy theory. You can go look this up for yourself in the historical record, in the local police departments, in the New York City Police Department, New York City Fire Department. The firemen lie when they say stuff like, I saw a big black plane, a gray plane, a dark jet with no windows on the side hit the building. Why would they make up something like that? Very specific description of the aircraft that allegedly hit the towers. I don't think the firemen would have any kind of conspiracy theory incentives to make up or to embellish details like that. So we know what really happened. It was military aircraft. They lied and said it was United and American for the sake of this sob story that they came up with. And the whole passenger list comes into question. The whole terrorist mastermind comes into question. Bin Laden, why couldn't they find him for 10 years? But magically on the 10th anniversary, they get this guy. So every aspect of the story has to really be looked at with a critical view. It's not just a house of cards where you can just poke a hole in my theory and say, oh, I've dismissed your theory. I've debunked you. The 9/11 Truth Report in particular, my book, like I said, it was a limited time run. Only 100 copies were ever printed. I hope to get it online as an online ebook pretty soon. But it goes into detail not about the technical aspects of what actually happened, because that's already been covered ad nauseum in films like Loose Change and other documentaries, other books that have really zoomed in on, what kind of planes it was, how the planes maneuvered, and all the rest of it. Simply am pointing out the fact that all of this symbolism, particularly the Twin Towers themselves, cannot be ascribed to Muslim Arab terrorists. Like I said, the Twin Towers themselves were nicknamed David and Nelson after the Rockefellers. You have to look at that connection to the Federal Reserve System. And then just the simple fact that the towers themselves looked like a giant number 11 and the attacks took place on 9/11. All of this symbolism, both numerological and iconic and symbolic, cannot be attributed to foreign terrorists. This is clearly an inside operation.
Who benefited the most from 9/11, do you believe?
Well, it was clearly the national security state, the so-called deep state, the Department of Homeland Security, we now know, it turns out they already had plans to make that before the September 11th attack event took place. So a lot of these things were already premeditated. The rebuilding of the buildings, we know that was a conspiracy. The demolition and the rebuilding of, reconstruction, they already had all these security measures in place, like the Patriot Act, Homeland Security, all these different foreign wars. We know that Bush already had the launch orders. He had actually a troops stationed and massed. I think the report was from CNN at the time. It was about 10 to 15,000 troops were massed on the border of Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and Pakistan, waiting to invade Pakistan. So they already had the whole war on terror planned out before 9/11, and they already had the whole mythology of chasing after Osama bin Laden for 10 years. They already had that planned out too. When they would finally capture him, the whole raid, Obama got Osama, the whole mythological narrative of him in the bunker and just waiting to get captured. All of this really comes into view, and the people that benefited the most were not the people that they said carried out the attacks, the magic Muslims, as it were. The people that benefited the most were the people that ran the whole operation, like the Department of Homeland Security, Operation of Emergency Management, FEMA, all these government agencies like the FBI, CIA, NSA. Again, if the surveillance state is so pervasive and they're spying on all these different terror groups, how come they let the attacks slip by every single time? Especially the biggest one of all, they claimed that there were no warnings, and then it turns out, even if you believe the official baloney story, on 9/11. They said that their warning signals were flashing red that summer. They kept getting details from other countries like Egypt and the Philippines that, watch out, hijackers might hijack a plane and fly it into the World Trade Center. So no matter how you look at it, they knew it was going to happen, and the people that benefited from it the most are the Pentagon and Wall Street, not Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden.
So just to recap what you're saying that after 9/11, a lot of these things happened. Like there was the rise of Islamophobia. We raided Iraq and we raided Afghanistan. We signed the Patriot Act, which pretty much pisses and shits on your constitution, your Fourth Amendment constitutional right to search and seizure. Um,
Fifth Amendment. That's their Fifth Amendment.
oh, Fifth Amendment. Okay.
I believe it. I believe
And,
it's fifth. I
and
believe it's Fifth Amendment.
that I believe, yeah, I think you're right. It is the Fifth Amendment, unless the Fifth Amendment is it I think the
That's
fourth
the
is see soldiers not being able to just invade your house during wartime. I think that might be the fourth one. Anyways, uh, and then there was Guantanamo Bay that also came into play afterwards as well. Um, okay, Uh, but going back to the Al Qaeda, but we were war. Some people may let if I were to challenge you on this and say, Glenn, we were in war with Al Qaeda for many, many years. We, in fact, they were our allies at one point, and we were supplying them weaponry. We even had Al Qaeda in the White House during I believe, the Reagan administration had them in the White House at one point. They were our allies. They were helping us fight the Soviets, and then they eventually turned on us, and then that's why we were fighting this war on terror for a long time before 9/11. It just didn't start in 9/11, and it was happening prior to that. What would you say to that?
Well, very simply, I will give you a quote from my book. I'm trying to pull it up here on my Google Docs. Um, if you actually read Webster Tarpley's book, the one that my book is based on, Webster Tarpley, Princeton University, again, shout out to New Jersey. People hate on New Jersey, but a lot of brilliant minds have come out of New Jersey.
Yeah, it's a great
Um,
state.
yeah, Webster Tarpley talks about it in his book, how the Keene-Hamilton Commission is no contribution to scholarly debate. In fact, I'll give you the quote here. Again, they never even wanted to have a 9/11 commission. All they wanted to do was scare everybody with 9/11, 9/11, 9/11, Al Qaeda, Al Qaeda, Al Qaeda, Bin Laden, Bin Laden, Bin Laden. I don't know if you remember this because you're younger than me, Amir, but there was a point actually where the White House press secretary, Ari Fleischer, under Bush, that was the answer to everything. 9/11 24/7 was the mantra. And no matter
Well,
what the question was,
Glenn, think
the
about the
excuse
state,
was,
right?
oh, it's because we got attacked. We can't
Yeah,
actually answer your
yeah.
questions,
Let,
where the money went, or, why are
let's
we're all of a sudden.
let's okay. Let's pretend you're the president, right? And 9/11 happens. and you're in a school and you're reading to a bunch of kids, right? And you're promoting your No Child Left Behind Act, which is what Bush was essentially doing, reading to a bunch of kids when he was, and the Secret Service came in and whispered in his ear, said, "Sir, Twin Towers have been hit. We believe we're under attack." What would your first response be? What would you do in that scenario? Wouldn't
Well,
there be
again,
rage?
Well, again, he had to keep calm during that situation. And Webster Tarpley actually has a whole section in his book where he addresses that very question about what a real president would have said and what a real president would have done if he wasn't actually just a puppet as part of this military coup. And as a matter of fact, it's on the record. Karl Rove let it slip that even that reading thing that Bush was doing at the school, it wasn't just a photo op for his No Child Left Behind. It was actually part of a military drill that was part of 9/11. So every aspect of that was literally incorporated as a part of this larger psyop narrative of, like Bush the father, this paternal father figure reading the book in front of the children to give him this image of a strong leader and all this other things in the time of crisis. So even that was staged, managed, and orchestrated as a part of the 9/11 conspiracy. And that's on record. That's not my opinion. Karl Rove is on the record saying that that was part of a drill, the whole Bush reading to the children. So literally every part of it is fake and phony, and he tried to give the appearance of, oh, I had no idea. That's why there's that popular meme now. Sir, a second plane has hit the second. So they've parodied that, to no end now. It's all over the internet now. The Andy Card famous meme whispering into Bush's ear. Let me just read you this little passage, this paragraph that I pulled up from the 9/11 Truth Report to answer your earlier question about, weren't we really at war and who are we really at war with? Let me just read you this to give you a tone. Kind of like synopsis of how the
Sure.
book isn't available online. Like I said, I hope to get an e-version and actually do another printing where we can mass distribute the 9/11 Truth Report. And then the second book is also limited run. Hopefully that'll be available as well. But let me just pull up my Google Docs and read you this thing real quick. Webster Tarpley, Dr. Webster Tarpley of Princeton University, says of the 9/11 Commission report, quote, this is page 34 of 9/11 Synthetic Terrorism, Made in USA, his book, says Dr. Tarpley of the 9/11 Commission report, quote, for the Keene-Hamilton Commission is not a contribution to scholarly debate. It is as much a part of the U.S. government's assault on the world as an F-16 bombing Fallujah, end quote. So the point in pointing that out is that Keene-Hamilton, the alleged commissioners of the alleged commission that investigated nothing really, 70% of the victims' questions were never answered. And if it wasn't for the 9/11 victims and their families in the first place, there never would have even been a commission. They're the ones that had the impetus to form the commission in the first place. Keene-Hamilton has failed to indict the real September criminals, Amir Khan, and instead has painted a picture of gross incompetence and what amounts to what they called a failure of imagination by government officials. And in my estimation, as somebody who's actually researched this and wrote the book on the topic, the 9/11 Truth Report, this is simply a furtherance of the imbecilic myth that Arab terrorists are responsible for catching the U.S. government off guard on a highly symbolic, highly emotionally charged date, 9/11, no less. In reality, the concept of 9/11 is just good corporate branding, the same way you have 7-Eleven, the store, right? I could call the store 9/11 and it would probably get just as many clicks and views, and people would still buy their sandwiches and their milk if you called it 9/11. So it doesn't matter what you call it, it's about how you apply that branding. And the branding of 9/11, it really, did numbers on the American psyche in terms of convincing us to support all of these wars that we wouldn't want to support. Like Tarpley says, the commission report itself is as much a part of the U.S. government's assault on the world as an F-16 fighter bomber bombing Fallujah in Iraq. So the dismantling of the 9/11 myth in favor of an account at least a little bit closer to reality will have the most profound institutional implications because the whole American society is so heavily invested in this myth, Amir, the entire social order of the world would be called into question if all of a sudden people started wondering, hey, how come the Wall Street Journal reported 6 weeks before 9/11 that Larry Silverstein took out a record insurance policy, 99-year lease on the towers? And
Glenn,
how come,
Glenn, hold on, Glenn, hold
how
on.
come this has all been reported in the mainstream news and it's
Glenn,
being
let's hold
called a
on there for a
conspiracy
second.
theory when this is all
Gl-
mainstream news?
Glenn, when you talk about him taking out insurance policy, Larry Silverstein, that's not true. He closed on the building 7 weeks. He closed on the building, purchasing it on August something
I
six
have the
weeks
I have
later.
the port. It's all in my folder. I have the Port Authority press release. I have the whole history. I know all the dates, all the names. I'm sick of it, frankly.
Right,
I wish we weren't talking about this
if
on the cast, actually. But the
but
point is, nothing was actually investigated. All of these
Glenn,
premeditated tells were then covered up in favor of an account that has nothing to do with reality, whether it's the planes, the buildings coming down, and then the wars that were subsequently the cause of all the
Glenn,
fallout.
if we apply like this $1 billion project of real estate, right? If we apply that same logic to, let's say, a real estate, let's say someone buying a condo, anyone who buys a home or a condo, they know that when you purchase something, if there's a loan involved, you're required to buy insurance. So when he purchased the building in August, he had to get it insured. So
July
I think
25th, July 26th is the date that they had the official press release, 6 weeks before. It was reported in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times and even CNBC with their little ticker in the attacks.
what I will tell you,
They
I'll tell you
mentioned
what
it
I
in
didn't like.
live time.
I'll tell you what I didn't like about Larry Silverstein. What he did do, he said that there were two separate attacks when really it was one attack, but he wanted more money, and he,
The,
and that's and he was arguing. Russ, see if you could pull this up
The
about
point
Larry
is they play
Silverstein.
these semantic games to distract you from the simple fact that this is an orchestrated conspiracy. None dare call it conspiracy, Amir Khan. That's the whole point I'm making in my book. There's really no point of getting into the weeds. That's what they want you to do. They want you to be a crazy conspiracy theorist arguing
Hold on,
about,
let's take a look at this. So
was it
Larry
fire? Was it jet
Silverstein,
fuel? Was it the Muslims? Was it the Jew? The whole
insurance
point is
policy.
this is an attack that was orchestrated, a very complicated attack that was clearly an orchestrated event that was not a bolt out of the blue, as was told to us by both the Bush administration and the so-called mainstream news, which said we could have never imagined such a thing, and it was all a big surprise. And they accidentally made billions of dollars off the attacks and the wars that followed as a
So
result.
so the maximum he wanted, what they were offering him, is 3.5 billion per event. The policy was a major point in contention after the September 11 attack, as Larry Silverstein as insurers debated whether the two attacks concluded on one or two events. Settlement was eventually reached in 2007, and they agreed to pay him out 4.5 billion, less than Silverstein had intended. I think he wanted like something like 7 point. Thanks, Russ. I think he had wanted like seven something $billion, and they
I
were
mean,
4.5.
if you want to go deeper into the Silverstein angle, since you have your producer in the chat, pull up, just type it into YouTube. I'm sure, even though they memory hold, very Orwellian fashion, all the truth, all the clips that we used in all our documentaries and all our proofs over the years, a lot of it's been scrubbed off of YouTube, but you can still probably pull it up. Type into YouTube right now, Larry Silverstein 2014 Israeli real estate conference, where he let it slip. So again, this is not my opinion or my interpretation. This is on the record. He had a Freudian slip where he admitted that the new Building 7 plans were already planned before 9/11. So that's something that nobody can debunk. Whether you want to play these semantical arguments about what does pull it really mean and did he really say that? Was it the firemen? Was it the building?
So
Again,
let's
all these
before
studies have already been done. He admitted in that real estate meeting on YouTube. You can pull it up right now. Larry Silverstein
okay.
admitted that the Building 7 design meeting
Uh,
was April of 2000, a whole year and a half in advance of 9/11. So answer that question for me.
uh,
Would
uh,
you?
uh,
Why would they have a new
Glenn,
Building 7 design
as someone
before
who owns real
9/11?
estate myself, and as someone who also owns real estate as yourself, it is very logical to have conversations about remodeling your real estate. I don't think there's anything wrong about saying, "Hey, I would like to,"
A third building that wasn't hit by a plane. Yeah, sure. They already
okay.
had plans for it, just in case it came
Can
down
I
on
can I ask
9/11.
you can I ask you like how did you come to the conclusion? Okay, here it is. Here's that clip that you were talking about, Larry
No, no, that's no,
Silverstein,
no,
career.
that's not it. You'll see Hebrew letters, you'll see Hebrew text. Let me see if I can find it and send it to you in the chat.
It's
Look
it's
up.
fine. It's fine.
There it is.
Glenn,
There it is. It's the
oh,
purple background. It's the second clip. Go back to the search. I can point it out for you if you like. It's right there, the second clip with the purple background with the Hebrew letters. There's a shorter
mhm.
version where somebody clipped it, and he says that,
Great pleasure
we had the
to
design meeting for the
introduce one of the
first
most
design
important
meeting for
people.
Building 7 was April of 2000, and then the first construction was in April, or shortly thereafter in 2002. And he says 2002 with a pause for emphasis.
Mhm.
So what happened between April 2000 and 2002? 9/11, 2001. So do the math. Was it 2 weeks after the fact? Because he says this on a different, was it Bloomberg or
Yeah.
Bisnow, one of those New York real estate interviews he does. He said, we had the design meeting for the new Building 7 2 weeks after 9/11. But if you listen to the 2014 clip, he says we had the new design meeting already planned for Building 7 a whole year and a half in advance. So somebody's lying here, and it's not Glenn Zarmanov.
Glenn, how did you come
Well, in
to
my
this
lifetime.
conclusion? Russ, it's fine. Let's stop sharing that. Glenn, how did you come to this conclusion that this is like the truth about 9/11 in terms of what you believe? Like what was it that clicked in your head and you said, okay, you know what? Like I'm gonna research more into this. What
Well,
were some of
just
the red flags or yellow flags, I guess?
yes, no, no. So just witnessing the whole thing. Like I said, maybe if I had been a passive recipient of the official mythology, as have been most Americans, i.e., that is getting the news of this attack via CNN or something like that day, maybe I would have been more prone to going along with the official story or the different explanations, the different versions of that official story over the years, because it keeps changing every single year. But witnessing the whole event in person at the age of 13, I think that
Wow.
was enough to solidify. It's not a matter of belief, it's a matter of science. Buildings don't just come down like that. Even at age 13, I knew that this is basic high school physics. If you drop a billiard ball from the top of the Empire State Building or the World Trade Center, it's going to fall down at the speed of gravity. A building cannot just go through the greatest resistance into itself from 10 floors of being on fire when the building, each twin tower, was 110 stories. It's basic math. 10 floors cannot crush the rest of the mass of the building, which was cold, hard, intact steel, which was not on fire and not getting ready to collapse. Physically
Russ,
impossible.
can we play
It's
this
physically
video of the
impossible.
building?
And the
Can we
same
play
thing
this
with Building
video
7. We now have
of
the professor
of
who
the
did a
building
whole study,
collapsing and the way
a
it collapsed?
master's degree program, University of
This is
Fairbanks,
this is
Leroy
okay.
Hall.
Let's play this. Let's play this. This is the second plane, I think,
But
hitting the
no
World
doubt a
Trade
lot of
Center.
activity on the ground right now.
There it is. You can see it coming in.
This is why I avoided the physical evidence of the conspiracy in my book, because the debates are endless and we don't have time to get into engineering debates, especially when the fate of the world hangs in the
Wow.
balance. And this was an attempt to launch World War III in front of everybody in New York City.
That 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 apparently does look like it is in
That
another
looked like it
building at
went
this
right
point.
through the building. Just the amount of sheer force and it
I
um
have my archives. If you want to do an extended interview, I have on my hard drive, my external HD, I have gigabytes. I used to have terabytes, but they scrub a lot of the info from the net. I have high definition footage of the airplanes and the demolitions and people's live reactions. So we know what really happened. And then they covered up the fact that we had all these eyewitnesses to all this so-called conspiracy stuff.
From the front angle before, but not from this angle.
and this is the point you're arguing right here when wait, no, this is the second plane still.
We have the NIST tapes.
Russ,
In
Russ,
2011, the
see,
National Institute of Standards and Technology was forced to release a massive cache of, like I said, terabytes, not just gigabytes, terabytes of photos and videos of what really happened. 10 years later, it came out, and now here we are 20 years later. So the truth is already out. It's not Glenn Zarmanov's conspiracy theory opinion. The physical evidence of the conspiracy is all over the web because they were forced to put it out there. But who's going to go through gigabytes and terabytes of hardcore interviews and pictures of molten steel and bomb wreckage and beams being? Who wants to sort through all that stuff? It's very depressing and very very sad, soul crushing. research.
Melt steel. There it is. Okay. Can you play that? Can you play that again?
Was shaking. We didn't know what that.
Okay. So, Glenn, what do you think about that when you see the building kind of collapsing, almost like in a
Again,
demolition style?
I'm gonna end this interview if we're gonna talk about the physical. I'm not here to talk about and rehash what, again, we've already known for 20 years. The physics is there. Dr. Leroy Halsey of the University of Fairbanks, Alaska, he did a whole master's degree program with master's students at a mainstream American university, and they came to the conclusion that what the government told us about both the Twin Towers and Building 7's collapse is simply factually inaccurate. It is false. It is a fraud. It is simple misrepresentation at best and outright criminal fraud at the worst. And I'm telling you, Building 7 and the Twin Towers were demolished with explosives. We have the Dr. Leroy Halsey of the University of Fairbanks, Alaska, his master's degree students who didn't have any kind of bias. They went into this and they looked at what the US government's own computer model said and what the actual videotape shows in real life, and they did not match up. It was blown up. Okay, so it's not I don't have to look at videotapes. I don't have to argue with you about can jet fuel melt. We know that the buildings were blown up. Now, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to hold people to account, or are we going to endlessly discuss this in Reddit posts and message boards for 20 more years? What do you
Glenn,
want to do about it?
Glenn, I hope you know that this is not an argument. Like this is you're able to
No, no, no.
freely
I'm not arguing with
express
you.
your
I'm trying to be
uh,
polite for the sake
yeah,
of the
yeah,
conversation. But I'm just saying,
yeah.
this is the tone. This is the nature of the art. This is why I wrote the
It's
9/11 Truth Report, because all of these inane arguments are designed as a part of the conspiracy to get you stuck in this loop of endlessly theorizing instead of simply applying logic and facts to the situation, and furthermore, being able to connect this conspiracy to other conspiracies to see that this is part of a larger agenda, the New World Order master plan to control human consciousness. Like I said, this is not a terrorist attack, in my estimation, as somebody who's actually researched this. This wasn't a surprise attack by Al Qaeda. This was an occult magic ritual on a global scale by billionaire class, the 1% so-called oligarchy that Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all these people keep talking about, but never seem to actually identify. This is who carried out 9/11, not somebody in a cave.
wow, that's certainly powerful to say. Um, so the
That's why
elites
I
really,
wrote
you're
two
saying,
books. Not,
okay.
not just the 9/11 book, but the Great Reset book, because they launched COVID as a follow-up on a global scale. 9/11 was kind of like a preview of coming attractions to see how much
Mhm.
could they lie to the public and get away with it on a mass scale. COVID really proved to me and to anybody else with a thinking brain that people will just swallow anything wholesale if you put somebody in a white lab coat and a nice suit and
Yeah,
tie and just
you know,
explain,
it's it's interesting. I think there was a study done by the CIA where they had a bunch of CIA officers, about 17 CIA officers, and the 18th person was just a normal civilian. They have them in a room. They showed them a shape. They said, "What shape is this?" And it's a triangle. So they're like, "What shape is this?" They go to all the CIA agents, 1 through 17. They all say square. They get to the 18th person, a civilian. They asked the civilian, "What shape is this?" Because this civilian did not want to challenge, did not want to be the only outcast. He says, "Oh, it's also a square," when it clearly was a triangle. So you believe that there is that control mindset, and we all know that CIA did projects in the 60s, 50s, and 60s, Project Bluebeam, MK Ultra, where they did testing on civilians, on mind control testing. Um, so you're trying to link to that. I mean, to me, it's interesting, all these the conspiracy theories.
Well,
Um,
again, let's just take a look at this aspect, right? Because you asked me what woke me up or like what, tipped me off, what clued
what
me in.
yeah, what clicked, right?
And I've told this story so many times. People accuse me of making things up. But again, there was kids in my classroom, Amir Khan, I swear on my mother's grave, The kids in my classroom, I'm still friends with them, so they can
And
attest to this.
you're seeing this happen. You're seeing this happen. You see the or you heard it on the news, or can you see from your window that the windows that a plane has
Well, yeah, I know. Yeah, I
crashed?
witnessed it from my high school window. So there's that, the witnessing of it in person. But 2 months, okay, this was in September, the actual event. 2 months before, in August and July, and also June, because we got out late that summer. I graduated late. We had like summer classes and stuff. But there was kids in my classroom in Hoboken, New Jersey, at the Hudson School, a private school that I went to, just one town over from Jersey City, where I witnessed the whole
Mm.
thing from McNair Academic High School. I actually witnessed the events on the fourth floor of my high school building. But there was kids in my middle school classroom, Amir, in Hoboken 2 months before, 3 months before, showing me on the $20 bill, folding it up, saying that, look, in a couple months from now, at the end of the summer, they actually said this to me. My own classmates in my classroom said 3 months before 9/11 happened. Watch out, there's going to be a big attack on the Twin Towers, and here's my evidence. Here's my proof. If you fold up the $20 bill, it foreshadows a subliminal message of the Twin Towers on fire. And literally, that's exactly what happened 2, 3 months later. There was a big attack, and then you come to find out that all these movies and all these TV shows around 2001, also like the X-Files, Lone Gunman, also depicted the 9/11 plot with precision. May of 2001, just months before of 9/11, Fox Network, Channel 5 here locally, they depicted a pilot episode of their new TV show 5 months before the attacks happened in real life, showing that a U.S. government agency was going to hijack an airplane by remote control and pilot it into the World Trade Center to start World War III with Muslims. And they specifically said, we're going to blame this on Muslims, and it's actually a secret government conspiracy on TV 5 months before it happened. So you tell me, who's making up the story here? Is it the kids in my classroom? Is it 20th Century Fox? Is it the CIA? Is it Larry Silverstein? Who's lying here? All I know is there was kids in my classroom in Hoboken, New Jersey, 2.5, 3 months before it happened, telling me, watch out, there's about to be a big attack. And they showed me the conspiracy on the $20 bill. I don't think Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda are behind our central banking system, Amir Khan. Do you?
Is that where you're okay?
Yeah, so that's one hell of
Image
a
of the
coincidence
White House.
that not only is that before 9/11, during 9/11, and after 9/11, that's still there, and anybody can fold up the money that's in their pocket right now and see that 9/11 is clearly an inside job because now it's already 20 years later. That's why you have the little inside joke, another layer of symbolism,
But
2020. You
but
see,
I
it
just
says
want to
2020
pull
right
you in a
there.
little bit
It's already
besides the
20 years
symbolism.
later.
That's besides the symbolism. What else clicked in your head that said this was
Well, just
an
all the
inside job?
lies. I mean, like you said, Bush's reaction was a very big tip off. Why wouldn't the president immediately say, we're going to not just halt all air traffic? They had to ground all the flights. I mean, that was a smart
Right.
move. They should have immediately closed the border to stop terrorism crossings on the southern and northern border if they were serious about, terrorism. They should have immediately implemented all these things to find out why that our government again spends billions of dollars to prevent such an attack. Why they missed this most obvious thing when there was all these reports. They were literally saying the lights were blinking red that whole summer that there was about to be a big event, and they specifically mentioned Pentagon and World Trade Center. So that's what tipped me
Right.
off. How shady the whole thing was, how CNN kept lying, how Bush kept lying, and the people who would never believe Bush on matters far less important than 9/11, they seem to buy the official story whole. So Bush was a liar before 9/11 and after 9/11, but on 9/11, Bush told the truth. Oh, there's no way that, he could be involved. Make it make sense. It doesn't the math wasn't mathin', no matter how you sliced it. And then building seven, that really sealed the deal. When you find out stuff like that, the commission was a fraud, the family members, they had questions about why they were bombs in the buildings and how come their relatives like William Rodriguez was never called to testify. He's a national hero, a local legend here in Hudson County, New Jersey. He lives up the block from where you're doing your podcast right now in Union City. Can't pay his bills. National hero, can't even pay his rent. I mean, none of it makes sense where we live in a country where we have this national security state, this state apparatus that's convinced us that we're all being spied on for our own good and it's all to protect us from terrorism. Magically, they keep missing all of these terror targets. The Boston bombing, they knew about that guy a year and a half to 2 years before it happened. They still allowed the attacks to go through. So it's very suspicious how all these things just keep happening and the national security state just keeps benefiting from it, saying, whoopsies, Raytheon, Halliburton just made billions of dollars. Whoopsies, we just invaded the wrong country that had nothing to do with 9/11. Whoopsies, we just profited again and again and again. So somebody's not telling the truth here. And I think that enough time has gone by where people, if they actually read my book, they would not only see the historical record and they could compare and contrast for themselves who's telling the truth and who's lying, they would feel compelled to do something about it. Unfortunately, like I said, so much time has passed that I don't know if we can do anything about it. And a lot of people have been buried or, a lot of people died from the health effects of the September 11th, the dust clouds and all that after the fact. So that's why I wrote my second book, The World in Polycrisis, is the follow-up companion book to the 9/11 book, and it talks about where we go from here, how the digital current. This is what I really wanted to talk about with you today, not buildings and airplanes, but yeah, it's what do we do now that we know that this financial system that we live under, the Federal Reserve System in particular here in America, now that we know that this is all a big fraud and it's all a scam to control people, and it's been set up specifically to fund terrorism and to scare the crap out of everybody, not to protect us from it. What do we do? I mean, is crypto the answer? A lot of people have been criticizing crypto over the last 4 years of Biden, saying that it's filled with scam artists and bad actors. But there's bad actors in any space. There's bad actors in the FBI. There was good people, for example, that tried to stop 9/11 and who tried to blow the whistle in a lot of these organizations. But there's plenty of bad actors and more of them than there are good actors, especially when it comes to oversight, like the banking system and all these other things that we're talking about. So my main concern is, where do we go from here, Amir Khan? Crypto seems to be here to stay. You have AI also taking over right now. The whole economic landscape is shifting from physical cash, whether the cash has 9/11 printed on it or not. The paper dollar is going bust. I mean, anybody can go to the store and see that, the price of everything has increased, even though it's always fluctuating. I mean, this is not the result of Al Qaeda. This is clearly the result of very corrupt finance oligarchs that are using fake stories and memes like 9/11 to scare the middle class, to scare the working class, and to keep us on this hamster wheel of just, like George Carlin said, go into these jobs. Most of these jobs have no spiritual significance. And, people talk about COVID, how COVID killed the economy. A lot of these jobs were never really that important to begin with. They were make work, do nothing jobs that people hated showing up to in the first place. So the real question is not whether 9/11 was an inside job. We know 9/11 was an inside job. What do we do now that we know that we're involved in this grand sociological experiment called the New World Order? Are we going to just submit all of our rights to the robots and the artificial intelligence and let them take over like the Matrix movies? Or are we going to actually stand up for our human rights and reinvent the economy with new financial and other innovations?
So you believe there are deep states, there's deep syndications within the government that are infiltrating our government or have infiltrated our government and are doing these disgusting, unhumane, erroneous things.
Well, it's a combination. Some of them have infiltrated recently, but most of these institutions are the foundations of our country. Like I said, the Federal Reserve is the foundation, it's the basis for the 9/11 conspiracy. The 9/11 conspiracy was founded in the bowels of the Pentagon in Langley, Virginia, not in a distant grotto in the Hindu Kush. This is the essence of what I'm trying to get across here is we need to look at where this deep state is actually located. And it's not simply in the halls of the FBI and the CIA. That's just one layer that they want you to look at. Oh, it's all Trump's fault. It's all the president. It's all the CIA. The president is only number, I believe, 17 on the list of 44 levels above top secret. So there's secret, above top secret, and then there's layers above top secret going way past the president of the United States. So as powerful as Donald Trump is, and whatever he might know about 9/11, he's only number 17 out of 44 layers of national level security clearances. So there's people way above Donald Trump that definitely know what happened, not just on 9/11, but with, situations like John F. Kennedy, which everybody's asking Trump to declassify, and all these other things like aliens and new technologies.
Okay. It seems like okay, I'm gonna wait for you to come back.
I'm just getting a glass of water. I'm just getting a glass of water.
I thought you were just walking off like
No,
mic
I'm
drop.
just getting a glass of water. No, yeah, a mic drop. Yeah, a mic drop.
Um, yeah, it's interesting. I feel like there are, so I agree with you on the deep states. I think there are deep states within our government that even the president is not privy of top secret level clearances where they know that presidents come and go, but we'll always be here and keep that true to ourselves. Do you think Donald Trump is a good person to come in and say, you know what, I'm gonna fix this. Like I'm gonna expose the deep state crap that's
Pull
happening.
up, if you can. I did this on the other interview that I did with Chris Don Harris, my buddy. He has a show called The Rundown Live, if I could plug that in there, from Milwaukee. He does a similar variety show where he talks about this kind of stuff. He has me on as his resident 9/11 expert. If you can, pull up, it was on BBC, The Guardian, whatever, on YouTube. If you can, have your producer pull up the Afghanistan withdrawal. On the side of the aircraft, the military aircraft.
This is the 27 this is the recent Afghanistan
Yeah, yeah. You like where all the people are running next to the airplane as it's
yeah.
taking off. It's a
Yeah.
very famous meme. It's a famous clip. It says right on the side of the aircraft, Amir, 11/9. That's the very date that Donald Trump was installed as the president in 2016. And 11/9 is the numerical reverse of 9/11. So does anybody else see a pattern here, or is it just little old me? All of these things are premeditated memes that have been planted in the mind of humanity by these 1% oligarchs simply to mess with us because they think so little of us that we don't read books, that we don't watch documentaries, that they can just stage all of these historical events and even laugh about them in advance in the media and do them on symbolic dates to throw it in our face, and still nobody will protest. So I don't know if Donald Trump is a good person. A lot of people seem to think he is. They seem to think that he's standing up for the right things, for nationalist ideals of, God, country, wrapping himself in the American flag, that famous meme of Trump hugging the flag. I don't know. A lot of people are also criticizing him, saying he's going to destroy everything with the tariffs, that he's going to lead to World War III. We're already in a World War III scenario, as far as I'm concerned, going back to 9/11, 2001. So I don't know if he can even fix the problems, even if he does mean well, because he's clearly part of this orchestrated conspiracy on a larger scale. He's part of the 1%. He's part of the billionaire class. He's part of this agenda where the billionaires are now coming out and saying, yeah, we run the government directly. We run the media directly. There's no need to hide behind puppet presidents and puppet administrations and institutions anymore. We're just going to have our representative, Donald Trump, come right out and say, yes, this is the way things really are. So it's kind of difficult to say because he's in a tough position. If you think about where Trump is coming from, he's in a tough position too. He can't just come out and say, yeah, this is the real reality. Your government is lying to you. It's actually a big, grand conspiracy against the individual, and you're actually powerless to do anything about it. He can't just come out and say that. So he has to obviously whip up some kind of a sentiment, like showing up at the UFC fight, showing up at the Indy 500, wherever, whatever he's doing, to try to whip up economic sentiment, because the economy is based on sentiment. And when emotions run high, the stock market goes up. When emotions fall flat, everything crashes. So the reason I ask you to pull up that Afghanistan withdrawal is, like I said, they're showing you subliminal messages, just like on 9/11 with the Bart Simpson, with the $20 bill, Federal Reserve folding trick. It's all in your face, Amir Khan. They're showing you that Donald Trump was installed on November the 9th, 11/9, and they're reminding you in the media with subliminal messages like the Afghanistan withdrawal that your producer was nice enough to pull up here, that in fact he was just another meme on 11/9. Donald Trump is just another part of this cast of characters, and here they are with the subliminal message after the fact, reinforcing it as they kept
Thanks. Thanks,
mentioning
Russ.
that during the election. But again, it was all premeditated. Biden,
Mm.
Trump, it makes no difference where you ascribe the blame. The point is, this has all been all these pieces have been put in there like a puzzle, like a game for these people, for you to endlessly try to connect these dots like a conspiracy theory. The simple truth is, it's just a bunch of rich people playing games with our lives and playing games with our economy.
How would you say the average person fight back and stand up for their rights? Because I think one of the ways that people did that was 80 plus million people said we're going to take this to the ballot and we're going to elect Trump, and he is going to fight for us, and he is going to flip the system on its head. And I think he has done a lot of that. He has flipped the system on his head. For example, let's look at the tariff stuff we were just talking about, right? He said this tariff stuff does not work. It makes no sense. Why, we're um charging them 20% tariffs, and they're charging us like 70% tariffs on the stuff that we import to their countries. Um, so how does the average person say,
Well,
I want to stand up to this?
don't blindly put all your faith in Donald Trump. I mean, for sure, I'm not in a cult of Donald Trump, but especially knowing what I know, like I said about 11/9, 9/11, all this symbolism, the Illuminati, what have you, his involvement, his connections to the World Trade Center, and Larry Silverstein also should be investigated, not just the Epstein connections. There's a lot to be criticized when it comes to Donald Trump, but yeah, everything is run on sentiment, like I said. So it's not so much Trump himself that's in question, but the Trump way, right? This way of thinking, this billionaire way of doing business. That's what's now coming into view. And if people could simply understand the philosophy of Trump, I think they would have a lot better time understanding the current socio-political and economic moment that we're going through right now.
How would you describe that billionaire class of weighing the way to do business? I think is part of that like alpha male, like I'm just gonna steamroll you whether you disagree or agree with me, and if you don't,
When you're that rich, you don't really care about money. You care about a quality job, a job well done. So that's what's going to bring back the American economy. It's not so much these tariff threats and ultimatums, although the policy initiatives on a macro prudential level is very important. International trade negotiations and renegotiations, reshoring, nearshoring, getting some of those jobs back, trying to get the plants to build stuff here instead of over there. A lot of that is very important. But the main idea to recognize is everything is run on philosophies and sentiments. So it's all about your epistemology. How do you know what you know? Are you getting your information from Trump? Are you getting your information from Silverstein? Are you getting your information from Bloomberg? Are you getting your information from CNBC? Are you getting your information from Yahoo News? Where are you actually getting these economic signals and indicators from? That's the real question. That's the real discussion that should be had. I mean, most people are so busy trying to just feed themselves and put food on their table. I can understand why they're not too concerned with all these nuances and complexities of the global economy. But the average person has to fight back. One way is doing what I did, that is writing these scholarly books and just cataloging for the historical record what actually happened, because people remember what happened on 9/11. You could lie as much as you want, but the historical the racial memory of mankind is always there to remind people of all these past genocides, past grievances, past injustices, past persecutions, whether it's the Holocaust or 9/11 or whatever. People will eventually, the truth will eventually out, even many generations down the line, when people try to cover up these atrocities. So that's one way, is, just to document these things with music, with videos, with literature, with artworks, to parody some of these things, because a lot of these subjects are very gruesome and depressing. Artwork is a very big way that we can fight back and empower ourselves. And then furthermore, if you can make money off your artwork, that seems to be a nexus point in with this whole crypto revolution. I mean, a lot of people criticize, including myself, NFTs, but the artwork, along with the financial restructuring, seems to be a great way that the average person can fight back against inflation and all of this massive institutional and structural reorganization that's taking place. Educate yourself, learn about Bitcoin, right? Learn about crypto. Don't just be for or against something because your friend said it or because the commentator on CNBC said it or poo-pooed it. Go investigate for yourself. What is this new technology? Why are people protesting all over the world these central banks and their policies, not just government initiatives?
Can I ask you, because you've published multiple books on the truth of 9/11, how have you been affected by this? Or how have you been affected by this?
Well, I wrote one book, but I have made several documentaries. Like I said, if you want to do another extended interview specifically on 9/11, I have a whole hard drive filled with video clips and my documentary, full-length documentary films that I produced. But no, it's affected me profoundly. It woke me up to the fact that we basically live uh, in like a Truman Show-like existence where we're constantly being gaslit by the mainstream media with all their lies, and they keep telling you, look over here, while over here they do something else. A simple sleight of hand, magician's trick. This is basic, you know, basic illusions 101. So no, I've been greatly affected, and the fact that it's upset me, it's disturbed my peace. I was a lot happier person when I wasn't thinking about conspiracies and conspiracy theories. I was just trying to be a travel journalist and a skateboarder when I was 13, when 9/11 happened. And here I am 20 years later, just trying to come to grips with the fact that not only was I right, I predicted it, and the kids in my classroom predicted it, but the fallout has been even worse than we predicted. We predicted as kids that because of 9/11 and all these different things that were happening, all these transformations, technologically speaking, around the turn of the century, that we would end up living in a very technocratic, dystopian surveillance state, and that's exactly where we're headed now. 20 years down the line, it's 2025, almost 2030, and pretty much almost no one disagrees with us. Everyone, disagrees on little details of how we got to this mess, but pretty much everyone sees what's happening now.
Yeah, they're definitely, it's, you talk about the surveillance state. When I go into the office, one of the things I go through is the Oculus, which looks like this giant Venus flytrap, if you ever seen it. I like how the plugs you're putting in, but that's a massive surveillance hub. Like they've got LiDAR
It's an eyeball. Oculus means
detectors.
eyeball. Oculus means eyeball in Latin. So there's literally an all-seeing eyeball. That's what it is. It's all hidden in plain view, all the symbolism.
And you said earlier, you were much happier, and how it's because of this it's affected you. Has it affected, like, have people threatened you personally? Has it affected your work?
Well, you know my story. You and Eric also, Eric knows my story. I lived with Eric for a time because it affected me directly. I mean, no, for sure. I mean, without getting into the personal details of other people, I don't want to bring them into this
No, well,
conversation.
the only reason I
It's
ask you
just
this,
like,
because
of course,
I
I
think it's
mean,
unfair.
of course.
Yeah, okay. The only reason I ask that is because it goes back to what we're talking about. People have different opinions and different belief systems. Just because they have these different opinions and belief systems does not mean they should be ostracized from society and ostracized from living their life, and not be able to, and being, and then be affected personally on a work level and personal life. And I just think that's wrong. Um,
It's certainly not my
yeah.
opinion, Amir Khan, that I was followed around and intimidated and harassed by the Department of Homeland Security and other haters and trolls over the years. That is not my opinion. This is all well documented in police reports, in call logs, in videos that I made on YouTube that were subsequently scrubbed from YouTube. I mean, the censorship itself is proof of everything that I have been through. If I was just a kook and a crank, a lot of these powers that be wouldn't have gone to such great lengths to censor my message and to try to delete me off the internet as they have. So that's why I had to go low tech and write two books because of all the climate of censorship and intimidation that these people have engendered since 9/11 and since COVID, especially.
Right. I think people forget the First Amendment just doesn't cover freedom of speech. It covers the right to religion, the right to petition the government, and so on. Right. Going back to COVID, what what do you think about COVID? You keep going back to saying that you predicted COVID. Is that
Well, I can let me pull up my second book. I have it in my Google Docs. If you'd like, I'll read you an excerpt from The Great Reset, The World in Polycrisis, which chronicles how COVID was a premeditated scaremongering tactic by the media. Again, they've had many pandemics before. This one was no better or no worse than other flus that we've had, like monkeypox or bird flu or other flus that that they had under Obama or other presidents. But for some reason, there was this massive insistence on COVID, that you have to wear a mask, you have to stand 6 feet apart. It's the greatest pandemic of all time. And just that alone indicated to me that there was some kind of a hype or agenda behind it, more than just a simple seasonal flu outbreak. This was clearly some kind of agenda. And again, what should have lasted 3 to 6 months tops, they tried to stretch out for all 4 years of the Biden administration because, again, the president is a sitting duck. The real agenda is to scare people and to control the mass mind, to steer the mass consciousness for their economic advantage. They come up with 9/11 attacks. They come up with pandemic attacks. They come up with all these supply chain shocks and disruptions to the banking system with housing crises and mortgage crises and dollar supply shocks and all these things, just so they can continue fleecing the public. Because remember, the ruling class doesn't need any more money. Their great pleasure in life is controlling the masses and watching them dance to their tune. So
yeah?
yeah,
How do you
COVID.
how do you
I have a
how do you
whole section I
respond?
could read you on
Yeah.
COVID.
How do you respond to people who say that's just the outcome you get when you have capitalism as a system because capitalism breeds
But
um,
it's not capitalism. It's a fascist corporatocracy. It's an oligarchy run by the corporations. The government doesn't run the corporations. If that were true, at least there would be some regulatory oversight. What we have is institutional regulatory capture, which means that the very people that have been elected to have these checks and balances are themselves captured as a part of this corruption and this conspiracy. So don't look at the CFTC or the SEC or the FBI, even under Kash Patel, under the new Trump administration. Don't look to these institutions to mete out justice and to right the wrongs of society. You have to look to yourself and build your local clusters. Your local innovation cluster is your local community. The Pakistani neighborhood, the Ukrainian local community center, the Dunkin' Donuts down the block. That's where the real revolution begins, is right here in McGinley Square, right here in Journal Square, right in your neighborhood, right inside your household, where even the way food is distributed, the way money is distributed within an individual household. Why don't we look at that? What I've been telling people the last couple of years, Amir, very poignantly, I might add, is stop worrying about the White House. Worry about your house. What about the economics of your house? Get your own house in order before you start worrying about how the United States is projecting its power on the world stage.
and currently how is the U.S. projecting its power in the world stage?
Well, like I said, it's
Are,
fascism. I mean, this is where I agree with the likes of Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Cortez. They've diagnosed the problem very accurately. Yes, there's an elite 1% group of asshole jerks that control all the money. It's called the billionaire class. The diagnosis isn't to burn down Tesla showrooms and to throw stones at these rich people and to say, oh my God, look, anybody who has $10,000 more than me is part of the Illuminati. No, the solution is to think like a billionaire and to start your own business, to fix the problems in your own community before you start telling other people how to vote and telling other countries how to fund their wars. People have
I
all
don't,
these grandiose political theories, but really what it comes down to is, where do you, as an individual economic actor, fit in to the grand scheme of things? How are you affecting the global economy? What are you doing to make the world a better place?
Glenn, you're frozen on my end. So,
Can you still hear me?
oh, there we go. You're back. Okay, you're back. There we go.
Yeah, the last thing I said is, what are you doing to make the world a
Right.
better place? So when people ask me what's wrong with the world, I just turn it right back around using the Socratic method and say, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. Why is it that when we hear stuff like this, like hear stuff like, I'm gonna wait till you come back.
No, I'm listening. I'm just getting the water. Just getting my water.
Why is it that when we talk about the New World Order and conspiracy theories and things that are that are not the so-called normal, uh, why is that our bodies automatically want to reject this thought? Like this cannot be true. Like why is that?
Well, it's those types of sentiments and questions that I try to answer specifically in both of my books. It's this naive sense impressionist epistemology. We've been bombarded by media lies for so long that we now look at life much the same way that these rich people look at life, like a video game. And in some ways, if you gamify your life, you can become rich and smart and happy and healthy. But in other ways, if you're at the bottom of the, totem pole and you don't have much resources to work with, life is not a game. But when people treat your life like it's a game, it can inflame a lot of negative political sentiments. What was the question again? Can you just repeat your questions specifically
That
again?
that when we think about this let's just say this entity that controls the way we think and the way we go about life, why is it that our bodies, let's say we were to face that thing, why is it that we automatically
Right,
want to
right,
reject that thing? Like
right.
it's like it can't be true, this cannot be happening, I don't believe it.
So yeah, so it's like a visceral shock. Yeah, so that visceral
Right,
shock,
right,
that's
that's
a
what
that's
it
a
feels
very
like, right?
that's a concept that I cover in both of my books, right? It's this cognitive dissonance between the expectations of reality and what reality actually is. A lot of people expected, for example, after 20 years that these 9/11 conspiracy theories would simply go away. But the reason they haven't, and a lot of them have actually been validated over time, is because the truth is the truth is the truth. It's like that Winston Churchill quote. You can talk about the truth, you can denigrate it, you can dismiss it, ignore it, but at the end of the day, there it is. I'm paraphrasing. I butchered the Churchill quote, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, the truth is the truth is the truth. A rose is a rose is a rose. Like Shakespeare said, by any other name, it would smell just as sweet. So, no, people need to just get their heads screwed on straight. They need to read a dictionary. They need to read an encyclopedia from A through Z and realize that there are certain calculable, objective facts that make up the objective reality. And whatever the media and history tells you is the consensus reality is often skewed or distorted view of the actual physical objective reality that we inhabit. So I try to look at everything from like a physics perspective. There's also quantum physics and metaphysics. Philosophically speaking, you can get into the weeds about higher dimensions and perspectives and all this other stuff. Is the rock alive? Is my cup alive? Is the computer that's recording me, does that have sentience? To some degree, that's what the whole mystery of the AI debate is also. It's getting us to question our humanity. Are we really even these great people that we made ourselves out to be, or are we just like a virus, like Matrix Agent Smith says in the Matrix movies? So I don't know what causes people to react so violently, but it's a topic that I explored. It's actually the reason I wrote my 9/11 book. Why do people get so angry when confronted with these basic historical facts and they adhere to this mythology of the official story with a certain religiosity, with a certain religious fervor? I mean, like you told me off camera before we did this interview, you're not a particularly religious person, and neither
I'm
am
not.
I.
I'm
And
not
that's the
that.
part that baffles me the most out of all these media narratives is how can people who are supposedly so college educated, so, they own a house, they have a family, they have a job, a lot of, regular, well-meaning folks just believe all of this nonsense. And then they accuse people like me, who are skeptics of this nonsense, of being the people promulgating the nonsense. So it seems that even that 20 years later, with topics like 9/11 and 60 years later with topics like JFK, we're still at an impasse when it comes to people's understanding of these events and how the world actually works. But when you pull back and you look at it, it's simply just human nature. People don't want to believe that Uncle Sam could be behind it. That's what it comes down to.
You bring up JFK. one of the next guests I'm having on is Jeff Morley. He's a journalist at BC, and he studied the JFK and the fact surrounding JFK, the assassination of JFK. What question do you want me to ask him? And if you don't have one now, just let me know later, uh, because I'm very excited to have a conversation with him.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I do want to wrap this interview up in the next few minutes, though, also. It's interesting. The JFK subject is something that I'm very interested in still. I went to Texas specifically on a road trip under Biden in 2021. First of all, to get out of town for a little while, but I specifically wanted to see the X marking the spot for myself where Kennedy was shot and to get immersed in the whole mythology of it and everything. I'm just trying to think of like a specific question based on my research that you could ask him. But yeah, no, it's a part
He
of
by the way,
American history, just like 9/11. And certainly there's going to be endless questions, even when the full truth is fully disclosed. People still have more questions after the new evidence always comes out.
yeah, he believes that the CIA had a lot to do with the JFK assassination, that they knew they had some insight as to his assassination, and they obviously did not talk about these things. So I'm excited to learn
I would
more about
ask you,
that.
like you were asking me, like what causes this visceral reaction when this is almost 100 years ago now? I could see how people could get away with something like a JFK conspiracy because the landscape wasn't so sophisticated back in the 50s and 60s. So you could pull off in 1963 on 11/22 the JFK assassination ritual. But when it comes to 9/11 in 2001, we already had, even then, with crude cell phones, flip phones, and all this modern technology like Google, you had enough technology in place to catalog and to blow the whistle on the conspiracy. With JFK, it's a bit muddier because it's so far away. The film is so much grainier, the footage is blurrier, and so on and so forth. I would just simply ask, how long can the deep state keep getting away with stuff like this? Because 80% or more of the public at this point definitely doesn't believe the official version of the JFK, and almost the same number, I think, on 9/11, 20 years later. Something like 60 to 70% of people don't believe the official story, when back in like 2004, 2005, under the first Bush administration, it was barely 20% said, like one quarter of the American public said inside job. Now it's almost 80, 90% in some polls.
Glenn, you were great to have on. Where can people find you and your work?
So that's what I was going to say. If I could just make a quick plug before the end of the
Absolutely.
episode. So they basically, on just to recap, they unpersoned me from the internet. I've been persecuted by human intelligence agents following me around, trying to scare me all over Jersey City, all over the place. So there's people still spying on me, even though the heat is basically off. A lot of the stuff is non-controversial. It's all chronicled in my two books. Hopefully, the two books will be available on Amazon, so look out for an online shopping cart and a mass publication very soon. I have a lot of people clamoring in my email list. They're already signed up for the new printing of the second book as well, The World in Polycrisis. But currently, you can still find whatever's left of me on YouTube by typing in Glenn Zarmanov. Also, if you just key it into the Google search, you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram at The Real Glenn Z. On Instagram is where I post some stories and some other updates and stuff. I'm currently in the process of trying to get back into the social media game, maybe doing some live streams myself on Instagram and Zoom and stuff like that. And for a time on YouTube, I had my own podcast called The Genius Zone. At the height of COVID, they started flagging my live streams for misinformation and for copyright strikes and all sorts of stuff. And I almost lost my live streaming privileges on all of these platforms. That's the only reason that people haven't really been hearing too much from me. And it's been a privilege and an honor and a pleasure to come on your show, where hopefully my message will get out. And of course, you can always drop me a line on my email, igloos, that's igloo with a Z, at gmail.com. My phone number is also public. That's why I've been inviting all this harassment into my life ever since I had started speaking out 20 years ago. But it's okay, though. There's more allies than enemies now that people have truly woken up and grasped these basic historical facts, and they see what we're dealing with. it's a climate of censorship, right? What good is it to have a YouTube channel if you can't even interview people about the books that they wrote and all this other stuff? And if you can't blow the whistle on government conspiracies? I thought we had freedom of speech in this country, Amir. To your
Look, man,
health. Thank you for having me.
thank you for coming on, man.